Hello and welcome to another edition of What Does the Giraffe Say with me, Kathleen Retorno. We are an organisation that aims to connect people with conservation efforts around the world by holding live interviews on social media. Today I am very lucky to be joined by Jose Tavares from Vultures Conservation Foundation, and he's going to be talking all about his project. So Jose, if I could just hand over to you, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved with the organisation, and also about the organisation itself.
Thank you, Kathleen, for the opportunity to talk about vultures. I always love to talk about vultures, and thank you all for being there and for listening. So my name is Jose Tavares. I'm a biologist. Been working for in nature conservation for the last 20 years. I'm Portuguese national, and I became really involved with the Vulture Conservation Foundation about 7 years ago. Before I worked for many years for one of the largest bird conservation organizations in the world, in the UK, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, RSPB, the BirdLife partner in the UK, and I was in charge of a range of international projects in a number of countries around the Mediterranean, where I indeed also was involved with a couple of vulture projects. At the time, I didn't know that my future then would revolve around vultures. So about 7 years ago, the opportunity came to work for the Vulture Conservation Foundation, and I took it. Why? Well, for basically two reasons. First of all, vultures do not have a good press. They usually have got the bad press. People today still ask me why vultures. They are ugly. And I thought that was a great challenge. How can we explain to people that these creatures that everybody finds ugly are actually extremely useful, essential, crucial to our ecosystems, and they can even be, and they are, very, very pretty and very, very attractive. And that was a very nice challenge. The other challenge, the other reason why I then decided to move to the VCF was that at the time this foundation, this international foundation, was very young and very small. And the challenge that was given to me was to really being able to shape and develop the foundation, not from start, but from a very early age. And therefore develop this project from this very early age and shape it along the lines of the strategic directions that I would like, that I would then decide. And that was, of course, very attractive and very challenging. And I've been with vultures ever since, with the Vulture Conservation Foundation ever since. When 7 years ago I started to work for the VCF, there were 2 people working in the VCF. Today we are a team of 15 people. We manage captive breeding network for the birded vulture. I'll come back to this. This is really one of our flagship projects, one of our great successes, captive breeding for reintroduction. We are bringing back European vulture species back from the brink, back from the extinction. We are restoring and reintroducing them to lots of different places across Europe. We are implementing around 10 large-scale vulture projects all over Europe, from Portugal and Spain, throughout France, the Alps, Italy, through to the Balkans. We are involved with some initiatives that link with Africa on vultures. We are involved with the CMS, the Convention for Migratory Species, on some global vulture conservation action planning and priority setting. So it has been a hell of a trip. It has not finished yet. There's still a lot of work to do. It has been a very successful trip. Vultures in Europe are doing very well, contrary, in fact, to vultures elsewhere in the world. In Asia, vultures declined by 99%. due to the occurrence of a veterinary drug called diclofenac that is very toxic to vultures and that appeared in Asia, in the Indian subcontinent, and that completely decimated and caused the near extinction of the vulture species there. Vultures are now extremely rare in the Indian subcontinent and throughout Asia. In Africa, vultures are doing extremely badly. 7 of the 11 African vulture species are classified by IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, as close to extinction, and they are declining. We can talk of a dramatic African vulture crisis. It is in Europe that vultures are doing very well. Of the 4 species of vultures in Europe, 3 of them are actually increasing or have increased significantly in the last 20 to 30 years. Their distribution range has been restored. They are reoccupying former range. They are being reintroduced. It's a globally very positive story, and this is partly due, of course, it's not only us, but it's partly due to the work that the VCF does with vulture conservation in Europe. We, of course, work alongside tens of partners in each one of the countries we are involved with, also very importantly, government agencies, universities and researchers, to write this beautiful story that is vulture conservation in Europe. It's a positive story. It's really, in a time where, unfortunately, most stories, most conservation stories are very negative. This species getting extinct, locally extinct, this species declining, this species getting catalogued as endangered. Vultures in Europe are actually a very positive story, a story of success, a story of, yes, we can do it, we can restore species if we work hard and if there are some conditions met. And I'm very proud to be associated with this wonderful adventure, which is vulture conservation in Europe.
I mean, it's some incredible work that you're doing. So tomorrow is going to be International Vultures Day. Why do you think we need, I mean, you touched on it a little bit, to raise awareness, but also why do you feel like vultures do have such a bad reputation? Is it just purely because of the way they look?
Well, it's also because they are associated with, in one way or the other, with death. They are what we call, and this is a technical term, I'm sorry for it, obligate scavengers. This means that really they need to survive. Their only means of survival is to eat dead meat, dead animals, carcasses of dead animals. There's a couple of species that can eat some small live animals, but generally speaking, most vultures only eat dead animals, carcasses of both wild or domestic animals that died in the countryside, and they basically then eat the meat, the flesh, the viscera, but also even the bones of these carcasses. So this association with death, and of course, we loathe death, we don't like death, is important. Is an important reason why they've got this bad press. You all know that when a politician is not very good, we call him, there comes the vulture politicians. You know that when we talk about finance people as the vulture people that basically suck the life out of normal taxpayers, and this is really this is a challenge. Vultures play an incredibly important role in our ecosystems. They are nature's cleanup crew. This means that they are the equivalent in nature of the garbage crews, the garbage teams that day in, day out clean our streets and our cities and our villages of the garbage. Again, it's not a very attractive or sought after job. We don't notice it. If we talk about garbage and garbage men, you may even say, oh, it's not really a great job. However, if they fail or when they strike, and garbage starts accumulating, you start complaining and you start to see the problems. You start to see the rats, you start to see the smell, you start to see the organic juices coming down the driveway from a pile of garbage. And this is exactly what happens when you don't have vultures in the countryside. And India, for example, was a very good example. As mentioned, there were lots and lots of vultures in India. Suddenly, very, very suddenly, because there was the introduction of this veterinary drug, diclofenac, which kills vultures, all of these vultures disappeared, and all those carcasses that were consumed and disposed of by vultures suddenly started to accumulate. One of the results of that was that there was an explosion of feral dogs that did not have any food to eat before, because vultures were far more efficient scavengers than any other animal. But suddenly, without vultures, they had quite a lot of dead carcasses. And one of the problems that brought was that suddenly the rabies, the number of cases of rabies in India shot up significantly, because of course with all these feral dogs started to transmit rabies to each other and started to attack and bite people, and therefore then the number of rabies cases in India increased significantly. Now, vultures do all of this for free. They clean our countryside of dead animals for free. They are extremely efficient scavengers. If you leave a small group of vultures deal with the carcass, they can clean it completely from a dead animal down to the smallest bone in a few hours. And in a few hours you have got absolutely nothing. It is so efficient that, for example, the 4 European species, the griffon vulture, the cinereous vulture, the Egyptian vulture, and the birded vulture, have developed different food niches within the carcass, so that they can actually explore all of them together, the carcass, and eat it all. Usually the griffon vulture comes first. It opens the carcass using its neck and beak and eating the soft tissue. Then the cinereous vulture and the Egyptian vulture do like to eat the more hard bits, the muscle, the tendons, the cartilaginous material. And when you've got only bones, there comes the birded vulture, also known as the bone breaker in many languages, that actually eats the bones and gets its nutrition from the marrow of the bones, which is by the way extremely nutritious material, and digests. It can eat a bone the size of a lamb's leg, ingest it into its stomach, and then it has got one of the most amazing stomachs of the animal world. It digests it immediately. Nothing survives the stomach of a birded vulture, and gets its food from there. So in a few hours you have absolutely nothing. Unfortunately, for farmers and livestock breeders in some places in Europe now recognize indeed this service, and actually establish in their farmyards or in their estates a place where they deposit some dead animals that die for one reason or the other in their estate, for vultures to do this extremely efficient service. It's what we call an ecosystem service. It's a service that we should value, and it is because of this that it is very important to raise awareness about the importance of vultures, but also about the plight of vultures. And therefore, every year during the first weekend of September, we have what is called the International Vulture Awareness Day, where a number of organizations and agencies that work with vultures organize lots of different things. This can be walks, this can be webinars like this one, this can be talks. Before the pandemic, there was a lot of social events, stalls, little exhibitions, and so on, which try to involve as many people as possible and try to celebrate the beauty and the usefulness of vulture species in Europe and in the world. We ourselves, we will be involved tomorrow with a number of events, including and allow me to publicize this, a pub quiz. You can actually participate in a remote pub quiz. It's going to be tomorrow, more or less at the same time as this event today. And if you want to know more details, just log in our webpage, www.4vultures.org, and there are details about how to register yourself in a pub quiz about vultures, where you'll test your knowledge about these wonderful creatures.
I mean, what you were talking on, I find it so fascinating, the fact that if you're just taking one species out of an ecosystem, the knock-on effect that then has, that people don't even kind of think about, and it's a huge issue. Now, vultures all around the world, as you kind of touched on earlier, are facing different threats. They have an incredible different amount of threats, from being unintentionally poisoned or being poisoned intentionally by poachers because they're circling around the food that they've killed. Then you've got stuff like the electricity pylons. They're getting used in things such as witchcraft in Africa. That's a whole lot of threats for you to then deal with. How do you combat that? And is there one in particular that is the biggest issue?
Yes, I mean, like other biodiversity, lots of threats, and the secret for conservation success is to mitigate and minimize those threats. Things that kill animals, particularly things that kill adult animals, breeding animals, is the worst you can have for the demography and long-term sustainability of a species. There is one threat in particular that is the biggest threat to vultures worldwide, which is poisoning. Usually this is poisoning that is not directed at vultures. This is poisoning that is directed at carnivores. And vultures are the unintended collateral victims of poisoning. Now, poisoning is, for the most part, all over the world, an illegal activity. It's an indiscriminate method of killing wildlife. It's very dangerous. It's very powerful. You can kill hundreds of animals with a little bit of a toxic substance. It's very dangerous for humans. It can kill, and there are cases of people getting killed by poison put out to kill wildlife. But yeah, the typical scene is in Africa, a lion or a leopard. In Europe, a wolf or a jackal attacking some sheep or attacking some cows. The poor livestock breeder wants to get rid of the wolf or of the lion or the leopard and uses this indiscriminate method, which is some chemical substance applied on some dead meat that then attracts eventually the carnivore, but also the vultures that come down, and then they all die. This is happening right now in Africa at a very large scale. Partly because there's a lot of carnivores in Africa. Then there are some variants of this, of illegal wildlife poisoning. In Africa in particular, there is what's called sentinel poisoning, and this is associated with poaching. What happened was poachers, so people that were killing elephants and rhinos for their ivory, found out that the enforcement agencies were actually using vultures as sentinels for potential poaching incidents. Because what happens when you kill an elephant, the vultures detect it immediately, so they start to fly around the carcass. And what the enforcement agencies do is they pick up where these vulture groups are, and then they go investigate, and very often they would find a poaching incident. So what now the poachers do very often is they kill an elephant, they then take a piece of meat, they put a very potent chemical aside, the vultures come down, they eat on that piece of meat, and they all die at the spot, and therefore they don't fly around and they don't attract the attention of the enforcement agencies. And unfortunately, we've been having events with 500, 600, 700 vultures died at the same spot in some areas in Africa. And then finally in Africa too, you have a very peculiar type of poisoning that is actually directly targeting the vultures, because in some regions, particularly West Africa, there is some belief that some vulture parts give humans some extra powers. Obviously, these are totally unfounded. This is this is not right, and therefore people poison the vultures in order to cut their heads and keep their heads, and therefore acquire these special powers that the traditional belief makes them really believe on. So poisoning is very, very important. It's really the main threat to vultures everywhere. It's an illegal activity. Because it is an illegal activity, it's something that needs to be dealt with also by the authorities. It's an environmental crime. NGOs alone are not enough to deal with poisoning. You need to involve the police. There needs to be a criminal investigation. There needs to be. It's also a very difficult crime to investigate because you need quite sophisticated capacities to do toxicological analysis and detect what was the substance and so on to get the evidence that indeed this environmental crime occurred. And this unfortunately is not present in all the countries. But yeah, it is. You absolutely need the police. You then need the judiciary to come in and to take these cases to court. And that's what we are doing in many countries: is working with the police, working with the judiciary, working with veterinarians and toxicologists to try to mitigate this threat. Electrocution and collision against the electricity infrastructure is another very important threat. Vultures get killed when they perch on medium tension lines, some poles, and then they touch the line, so the earth and the wire at the same time. And some poles have got a very bad design. This is relatively easy to correct. You just need to insulate some parts of the wires so that when they touch these wires, they don't get killed. And against collision, you need to put some markers that will, fluctuate in the wind and therefore alert birds and vultures for the presence of the wires so that they don't really crash against them when they are flying. Finally, food is very important. This doesn't kill, of course, but the availability of food is a very important element in vulture conservation. Where there is no carcasses and where there is no food, there are no vultures. And I can tell you a story. A few years ago, in fact, we were almost on the verge of losing European vultures because, as you very well know, mad cow disease appeared in Europe. The veterinary authorities, rightly so, got very worried, and they decided that all carcasses of animals, domestic animals that died in the field, would need to be picked up and taken to an incinerator to be incinerated, so that the mad cow disease would not be spread because of the existence of those dead animals that could eventually be infected. This caused the disappearance of food from one day to the other, and vultures suffered. Fortunately, we have managed to convince the veterinary authorities in Europe that in some circumstances, with some type of animal subproducts, we can leave very safely the carcasses on the ground, because vultures come in and they clean them up extremely effectively. This is happening, and as I mentioned, in many countries in Europe, livestock breeders are a very engaged part in vulture conservation, and they leave the carcasses of their animals for vultures to consume. And last but not least, lead from hunting ammunition. We've banned lead from everything. We've banned lead from petrol. We've banned lead from painting. As you know, lead is toxic to all animals, to humans, and that's why we've banned lead from petrol. So now we've got unleaded petrol. There's no more leaded paint. Before, quite a lot of the paint that we used for our houses contain lead. Yet we haven't banned yet lead from hunting ammunition. And what happens is, very often, vultures eat game species that were killed with hunting ammunition, and therefore with lead. And they accumulate the lead in their bodies, and they die, or they do have got problems. Very easy to do. You just need to substitute the lead bullets or the lead shot with unleaded alternatives. They are available. and we just really need the authorities and the hunters as well to collaborate to eliminate these other important threats to vultures. But yes, conservation is mostly about mitigating threats. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint run. It takes a lot of time, and you really need to tackle threats. As I say to many of my colleagues, think threats all the time, and you'll be able to get positive results.
That's so interesting. I didn't actually know about the leg one. So yeah, that's really interesting to know that that's going on as well. So then obviously we can't talk about anything at the moment without discussing COVID. Has that had any impact on vulture conservation or the work that you're doing?
Well, there was some anecdotic positive impact on vultures, and in fact, on quite a lot of other wildlife. In some places in Europe, there were a lot less people moving around. And in some places there was a lot less disturbance to breeding sites. So there is some evidence that, I mean, of course it's only 1 year, but there's some evidence that in some cases there was obviously some positive. But I mean, the pandemic is of course not good for anybody, and we really all hope that this goes away at the earliest. We had a huge challenge which had to do with breeding in captivity vultures and then releasing them. Our network of captive breeding for reintroduction is based in particular for the birded vulture, which is the one that we manage very directly and very proactively, is based on or involves about 40 institutions in about 15 countries in Europe. And we do a very proactive management of the captive stock, which involves exchanging animals to pair them, to breed them, and when they finally produce offspring, take offspring from different locations and transport them to reintroduction sites. And this happened right in the middle of the pandemic in March, April, and May in Europe, where people were not allowed to travel. Fortunately, this would mean that, in the worst case, we would not be able to release birds this year because it was impossible, say, to move a young vulture from Spain to France in order to release it at the right time for its survival and for its existence. Fortunately, due to the hard work of our partners, we managed to get permits, exceptional permits, to move these birds. And while most of us were stuck wherever we happened to be at the time without the possibility of moving, we managed to actually move these young vultures, and we managed to fulfill our reintroduction plans this year. So it went very well, but it was a huge challenge. And I would like to thank all the partners, including also obviously governments that gave us the permits for those exceptional trips, for us to be able to do that essential and crucial service and continue with our conservation projects.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I've only got one more question left. So if there's anyone back home that's watching and you'd like to ask a question, then please do just pop it in the comments section and I will put it towards them. And if you're watching this and it's not live, you're watching this later on, do still put a comment in and someone will get back to you. So Jose, I just wanted to ask, I'd like to try and finish on a nice note. What would you say is your favorite success story?
Well, it has to be the comeback of the birded vulture, which is that vulture species that eats bones, to Europe. It's a beautiful bird. If you ever looked into the eye of a birded vulture, the birded vulture has got a fantastic orange ring around the eye. If you ever look into the eye of one, you will never forget. It has got a small beard, and that's why it's called the birded vulture. It was a species that once upon a time was down to 70 pairs in Europe. And in mainland Europe, it only survived in the Pyrenees. And about 30, 40 years ago, a group of visionaries that eventually created the Vulture Conservation Foundation started with a crazy idea. Why don't we reintroduce it back to the Alps? It had disappeared from the Alps. It had disappeared from most places in Spain, in France, in the Balkans, in Italy, and so on. It was only surviving in the Pyrenees and quite only a few tens of pairs. So the idea was, okay, there were at the time 30 to 40 birded vultures in captivity in Europe. Let's purchase, and with a grant from the Frankfurt Zoological Society, they purchased those 30 or 40 birds that were in captivity in zoos and all that, and they bequested them to the organization that I now direct with a challenge: breed them in captivity for conservation and reintroduce them to the Alps first. And this has been a wonderful story and a fantastic success. The first bird was released. We had, of course, to develop captive breeding. How do you breed a birded vulture? I mean, in the beginning was a bit trial and error. A lot of techniques, protocols were developed. Things were very slow at the beginning. Then we started really to know our business and to know what we were doing. First bird was released in 1986 in Austria. First breeding in the wild happened 11 years later. They take about 10 years to breed for the first time in nature. They are a long-lived species. And now there's about 60 pairs of birded vultures back into the Alps. And the population is now self-sustainable and in the wild, and is increasing significantly. Every year there's a few more pairs. This has been such a good story that everybody now wants to do it elsewhere. So after the Alps, we started in Andalusia with the regional government of Andalusia, where there is now already a wild population established. And we are doing it in other places. We are doing it in Massif Central in France. We are doing it in Maestrazgo, in another mountain range in Spain. And very soon we will start the same in the Balkans, in the mountains of Bulgaria. So this is really bringing a species from extinction. There were no birded vultures in the Alps. There are now 60 pairs, and the population is self-sustainable, and it's a joy to watch. And it links with what I said in the beginning. Yes, we can restore vulture populations if only some conditions are met.
Excellent. Okay, that's a great story. I like that. We've got one question from Gina Craggs, and she's asking, what can we as the public do to help with the poison problem?
Well, several things. You can certainly spread the news about this issue and the fact that illegal wildlife poisoning is not a solution and is not a tool to be used to solve human wildlife conflict. You can spread that message across your networks. You can ask your governments and the decision makers, your local government, your national government, what are they doing on this front. There are plenty of resources, some of them available in our website, where you can get a little bit more information about this. And you can, of course, also support and donate to nature conservation organizations and vulture conservation organizations like the VCF to allow us to continue with this work. But I mean, just by raising awareness, this is already very important. And saying, hey, putting poison to solve a problem with wolves is not a solution. There are alternatives out there. Let's speak and let's spread the news.
I mean, touching on that, what you just said, I'm just curious to know as well, do governments take it seriously? Is it seen as, do they follow it up? Do people actually get prosecuted?
That's one of the challenges. They are now starting to get serious in Europe. It's really, I think some of it is because societies do not see environmental crime as important for our societies as, say, crime that involves humans and our societies. I can give you a statistic. About 95% of the cases that involve a murder in Europe get solved. Yet only 5% of cases of environmental crime ever get some sort of a criminal investigation and some sort of a judiciary output. Sometimes enforcement agencies are not trained to deal with them. To deal with this type of crime, and that's what that's very often what we do. We work with the judiciary, with police forces, and suggest, hey, this is important too. This has got obviously consequences and impacts in the sustainability of our planet, and therefore people should everybody should take care of this. And this might be indeed one side effect of the pandemic. We covered this before. I think it has been really bad for everybody. Lots of people unfortunately got killed or infected. But I think it brought home one important message, is that everything is connected. The COVID pandemic probably started in a wildlife market in China and passed from, and so there are links with the trade of wildlife and the encroachment of humans on habitats, capturing wild animals to then trade in markets and so on. And the other important message is that we are our lifestyle was not sustainable, and I think that the virus is in many ways, this virus, like many others, is in many ways a symptom of a very sick situation we have in our planet, and therefore an environmental crime should be regarded, so poisoning should be taken care of by the authorities. Unfortunately, in some countries this is the case. I can tell you that, for example, in Spain, we are seeing a significant evolution, therefore a decrease in the use of poison baits to deal with problem wildlife, because the authorities there have for the most part taken care of it, develop an action plan and a strategy, and provided the resources to fight illegal poisoning.
Yeah, I think it's a very big wake-up call at the minute. Okay, well, I'll wrap up now then. Is there anything that you'd like to finish with before?
No, I just would like to thank you all. I hope that with this short conversation, you have changed a little bit in some way the image you may have had of vultures, and see them in a more positive light. Do join us in our website, in our social media, Facebook and Twitter. They are fascinating animals. Every day we publish some really interesting fun facts about vultures from our projects, from other organizations' projects, some very positive stories, some not so positive stories sometimes. So there's a lot to learn and a lot to discover. Visit our website and our social media, and I'm sure that you'll be engaged, and who knows, hopefully you'll also participate and contribute a little bit more actively on vulture conservation.
Excellent. Well done. Keep up the good work. It's some great stuff that you're doing. And don't forget, people back home, that there is the pub quiz tomorrow. So go and give that a go. And also don't forget that if you did want to ask further questions, then please do just pop them in the comments and someone will get back to you. But for now, thank you very much for tuning in and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you all.